Hello! Today I'm going to be taking a look at these Pentel Aquash watercolour oil pastels. I saw these in a store in Portland, Victoria. I've never seen them anywhere else. I have no idea what these are like. I haven't seen any reviews on them. So today we're going to find out together if these are any good, and let's get into it. So these are, I'm pretty sure, Japanese, and as far as I know they come in two sets, one as a 12 set and this larger one is the 24 colours. It also comes with a water brush. If I flip over briefly, here is some information about them. And there's a few different languages there. Oh yes, see, they are made in Tokyo, Japan. There we go. So let's open it up and see what they look like. It's quite a nice pearlescent looking box. It is cardboard, and there's a little bit of foam in there. And here are the pastels themselves. So they are square shaped. They do have a name on them. I just found it. It says pink number 15, so that's quite good. I do not know if you could buy those as singles. I really don't know too much about them, so I'm going to be putting some information in the description below. Just random, but I really like the stripes on the inside of the box. Let's just take a look at the water brush. Look, it even says it in there. It's pretty flimsy feeling, and it looks fairly standard. It's got quite a nice point on it. And it just does the usual unscrew, so I will go and fill this up and we can test it out. By comparison, this is an actual Pentel Aquash brush, so it looks slightly different to it, and my nib has been quite well used there. I do like this brush a lot though, so I'm hoping that the one that comes in this set is also just as good. So that's all filled up and there's water coming out. This aquademic stuff I paid, I think, $2 for, but it's actually quite nice and I don't mind it too much, especially just for doing some little swatches. So what I will do first is just colour a couple out and see if the water will actually dissolve them out fully. They're quite soft. They feel like they're quite pigmented too. You can see the texture of that paper underneath, so I'm just going to run that lightly over. They're very soft, like an oil pastel. I could have done blue, I suppose, but no, never mind. Let's see if they actually fully dissolve out in water, because sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. Okay, I've got some water just above me, so I'm just going to use it to rinse out the water brush because I'm far too lazy to dry it on a towel. You can see there is a little bit of resistance. I'm having to scrub a little bit to do so. It can also be the paper doing that as well, so the purple doesn't seem to have dissolved out quite as nicely. And let's just check out this yellow. That one's working quite nicely. I feel quite waxy on top, like it's just sitting on top of the paper. So as a comparison, I've got some Caran d'Ache Neo Colour 2 crayons here, which are the water-soluble range, and I'm just going to grab a couple to see if they dissolve out on the paper or if it's the paper doing it. Okay, immediately I can see that the Caran d'Ache ones are dissolving much faster than the Aquash ones. Yeah, there's a considerable difference there. It is still leaving somewhat of a texture on the paper, but with minimal scrubbing it's pretty much all coming out. And last one is the yellow. Yeah, that's just so much faster when it comes to dissolving. So you could probably see there is quite a difference, especially that purple one. That one does not seem to want to re-wet very well at all. The red one's not too bad, and the yellow is leaving quite a bit of texture as well. I'm going to take a gamble and swatch them out in my large etcher sketchbook. This paper is 100% cotton. It's pretty thick. I think it is 300 GSM, or is it 240? I can never remember, but it is a thick paper. I have no idea how the crayons are going to behave on this paper. I don't think I've even used the Caran d'Ache ones on watercolour paper like this, so we will find out together. It's voiceover Becky. Things pretty much went downhill straight away. As you could see, I smudged the pen line with the white and The rest of the video doesn't really get any better from here. The colours are nice, I will give it to this set. I really liked the colour palette. You could see just how textured this cold pressed watercolour paper is, and that's going to happen with any kind of pencil or crayon or pastel, so that's not the paper's fault here or the pastel's fault, it's just the way of it. I will be going on to some smooth paper a bit later, but I did want to see how they would actually reactivate on watercolour paper. That's cotton and not cheap, unlike the other paper that I first used in this video. And let's find out right now. Yeah, that was a right old mess. It's just a grey blob, so just ignore the white one. The yellow doesn't look too bad, but as you will see when I start to move down the paper, swatching out each colour, the yellow-green especially, they just do not reactivate very well. It leaves so much texture on the paper, and I used quite a lot of water. I used a fair bit of scrubbing, as you could see on that poor old water brush, which is not really designed to be doing that. It was so disappointing. I had such high hopes for these and they've let me down horribly. All I can say is I'm glad it is only a 24 set and not a really massive set where I'd be swatching out even more colours of disappointment. What actually does swatch out is very pretty, but the fact that it leaves so much texture is just not good enough in my book. I would hate that in a painting, especially on watercolour paper that is textured like this. So yes, we have an epic fail when it comes to this lot of swatching. And the longer the pastels sit dry on the paper, the more difficult they become to reactivate. Well, that's a gigantic disappointment. They are not working really well at all on this paper. I am going to compare the Caran d'Ache Neo colours. I've never used those in this book either, but I'm very curious to see how these will behave. So I'm just going to do a couple up the top to see if they are any better than these. In the interest of fairness, and I just know someone's going to point it out, the Caran d'Ache Neo Colour 2s are waxed based crayons and the Pentel Aquash pastels are actually oil pastels, so they are actually quite different mediums when compared to one another. But what I was trying to show here is that crayons and pastels are kind of in the same sort of family together, and I would use them in much the same way. But can you just see how immediately the Caran d'Ache crayons have reactivated and almost all of the pigment dissolves out, with a little bit of scrubbing involved still, because I find that happens with any water-soluble material, but they are just so vastly superior to the Aquash pastels, and I don't know if that's because the oil pastels are stickier and are more hydrophobic. There is a big difference in the texture between the wax crayon and the oil pastel, but it's kind of like when you're shopping around and you want to find something that's water soluble. There is a clear difference here between one product that actually works as advertised and the other which ends up being a complete letdown. I mean, it's like night and day really, isn't it? The Caran d'Ache Neo colours are just far superior. These ones are clearly not budging by comparison to these ones, which almost lifted completely. There's a little bit left. I tend to find that with any water-soluble pencil or crayon anyway, when you colour it directly onto the paper. The colours themselves are actually quite pretty when you look at the bits that have fully dissolved. I like the colour palette, and the pastels feel nice to use. They're lovely and soft, so perhaps it's just that they don't like to be on rough paper. So I'm going to do a smooth paper test with them shortly. But I do have one more test to try out on this paper in this tiny little section that I have here. I've drawn some highly realistic flowers on here, but I'm also noticing on the brush, quite hard to see, but can you see how the brush is already disintegrating? And that's because I had scrubbed it on the rough paper. So this does not like being on rough paper or being roughly used. I think I might end up going with some other brushes, more sturdy Taklon ones, because this poor thing is already falling to pieces. I'm not having a good day with these, that's for sure. So what I thought I would do is actually, rather than colouring directly onto the paper, because we can see that doesn't work very well, I'm going to try using them like watercolours. So I'm going to colour onto this board which is designed for water-soluble Caran d'Ache objects, but I'm sure it will work well enough for these Aquash pastels too. I'm just going to colour directly onto the board, and then, using a more sturdy brush, add some water, and hopefully it will turn into a nice smooth paint, which it is doing. So it looks like they will work like this. But when I buy water-soluble items like pencils or pastels, I do want to use them directly onto the paper. So for me, this is kind of a secondary technique that I would use with them when I want to do maybe a wash over the top. This is not how I want to start a painting, but I'm going to because the other way is clearly not going to work. Just to add to the fun, I didn't realise until it was too late that the brush I'm using here had some old ink in it, and of course it just went everywhere, so my colours are all tinged with this hideous grey colour. What a delightful treat! But dinginess aside, the pastels did work a lot better this way, because they were pre-dissolved on the plastic and they went on like watercolours. It didn't want to come off the crayon though. It was a real struggle to pick up any pigment there, so that was something else that didn't work. And I always find with this technique that no matter how much pigment I put onto the plastic, it always just ends up being really weak. So I'd much rather just use watercolours if I'm going to do this type of technique, because you can get a much darker value. And then I had to go in with the Caran d'Ache Neo colours just to do another little comparison. These were so much more saturated, they once again reactivated far more easily, and I just like them so much better. Sorry to harp on about those. At this point I was just so frustrated with the watercolour book, so I ditched it, and I'm giving these Aquash pastels one more chance on smooth paper. This is the Joanna Basford calendar and we're into March, so that's what I thought I would colour today. There's no way I was going to make an artwork, I was just too mad with them. Now, they don't really work that well on smooth paper either, but it was a vast improvement when compared to rough paper. But really the biggest issue that I have with the Aquash watercolour pastels is that they just don't reactivate as well as other water-soluble products do. Otherwise, the colours in them were nice and vibrant on this paper, so when they're used like regular oil pastels, they actually blend extremely well together. They're nice and soft, and the consistency of them is quite buttery, so they're a pleasant supply to use when they're dry. But these are actually marketed as water-soluble products, and because they don't work as advertised, that's why I'm being pretty harsh on them. It's just frustrating, you know. You spend money on something and you want it to work, and when it doesn't, it's like you've just wasted all this money and you get the buyer's remorse, and I just hate that. These weren't particularly expensive. I can't remember exactly how much they were, maybe about 25 Australian dollars, something like that. But when it comes down to it, it's not so much the price of something. I would rather pay more money for a product that actually does what it says it's going to and be happy with it. So it's also that intangible quality of, does this art supply bring me joy? And I'm afraid these ones did not. They just made me mad. But I am quite proud of myself. I persevered and actually managed to finish the whole picture using only these pastels, and I did keep using water on top of them even though it wasn't working that well. I can imagine that if I wasn't filming this, I would have rage quit and thrown those in the bin. But I suffered through this so that you don't have to. And that's enough whinging from me today, I think. I hope these reviews are helpful when you're shopping around looking at the next art supply to buy. It's such a minefield out there as to what's good and what isn't, so I am just trying to put forth as honest a review as I can. And yes, I have a lot of reviews where I praise the products. It's not often I find something that I really dislike, and I'm afraid this is one of them. Someone got really mad at me in the comments because I had praised something and they didn't believe me. It was so weird. And so I do just want to qualify that in my videos, I am one person making reviews that are totally personal to my own tastes. And of course, it is totally fine if you completely disagree with me on them. I can only just give it from my point of view. But anyway, just going past that little funny thing that happened, you could see the lovely mess I am making with these oil pastels. I had started using them more like pastels and just trying to blend them together a bit more. It worked out okay. I mean, the addition of water does do something, it's just not as good as I want it to be. It's very hard to colour precise little lines with a blunt oil pastel, so I wasn't really trying to stay in the lines here very much. It turned out okay in the end. I like the vibrancy of the colours. I just wish they weren't so frustrating to use, and I also added in some gold pen just to go over some of my mistakes and make it look a little bit neater. Okay, I am calling it quits. It's enough for me today. So I have to say, they are nice and bright. I mean, there's no problems whatsoever with the vibrancy of them. They are highly pigmented and they do behave nicely when they are worked like regular oil pastels. But that defeats the purpose of them. They are supposed to be watercolour oil pastels, and they really just aren't that great when they are mixed with water. They don't dissolve properly enough, and it was frustrating. I didn't have a very good time doing this, although I did like the colour laydown of them, to be fair. So, would I get these again? No, I would not. Do I recommend them? No, I do not. I think if you're going to get something of a similar ilk that's water soluble, just do yourself a favour and get some Caran d'Ache Neo colours. They're more expensive, but they are far less frustrating than these ones. And normally I would put affiliate links for shopping purposes in here, but I'm not going to do that because I just don't want anyone else to buy them and then blame me for them not being enjoyable. So I'm not putting any links to them, but I might put some information down from the Pentel page. Pentel makes some really great products, but unfortunately with this set I think it's a swing and a miss, and unfortunately it's just not a supply that I would reach for, although I might try and do maybe just an oil pastel drawing with them without using any water. So let me know if you like them, if you've ever used them, and would you ever get them now that you've seen this video. Thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if it was helpful, and click that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. I will see you all again really soon in my next video. Hopefully the next art supplies I use will be slightly less annoying. Anyway, take care for now, and I'll swatch you later. Bye!